Yeah, hi guys, I'm Srilatha Rajamani. From India. My name in Sanskrit means she who will never be the president of America. Yeah. And in America, it means wow. You speak English really well. Yeah, I moved here from Boston, and the story that I'm about to tell you happened in Boston. And like Boston is weird. Like to put like Boston is a place which is in the news now because uh, during Pride Month and the month after Pride Month, someone wants to hold a straight parade, which is basically any after football party in Boston, really. So, yeah, Boston is kind of weird, very progressive in some parts and extremely not in the other parts. But this happened 4 years ago, like around the time the Boston Marathon bombers trial was happening, and so this was like, and it had like that incident when it happened was like on in 2013, and so when this happened it was 2 years after. And we humans, we have the tendency to, like, that's how we survive. I think when something really awful happens, we don't always, we know it, we are like, trying to like live through it after that, and we try to live our best without like always like, in that, so and like that's how I try to, like, marathon bombing was pretty traumatic to me because I was there, one of my friends was running, so it was very scary. But after that it was also scary because everyone was thinking it's people who look like me who did it, so it was very scary to be a person like me. It was like sort of like reminded me of like post 9/11 when I was still like, and when I was in this country at that time. So but then in 2015 it had been done with. Like, we knew who had done it. There was a trial happening, so we didn't, like, we live our lives. That's what I was doing. And this was in March on a weekend. I was on my way to the Microsoft store. Like, I'm a big nerd. Like, I work in tech and I love, like, for me, going to the Microsoft store or the Apple store is like how a lot of people, like a hoarder, would like to do, going to BJ's or Costco. Like, that is like heaven to me. I love it. So I was on my way there, but I was also really excited that day because I was going to, like, I had like custom built a Surface Pro tablet. Um, and if you're a tech nerd, you would know it is just the best feeling when you're like, it just, and I was like going to, and the best part was that I was going to give some of my I had two old ThinkPads that I was going to give away, and I was going to get like a discount. And I don't know if you all know this, but we Indians kind of love our discounts. We enjoy it a lot. It's a cultural thing that I'm proud to own. We love that. So I was carrying a backpack filled with these things, and I was standing in the train from my place to the Microsoft shop, which was like in Prudential Mall, which is like maybe about 15, 20 minutes away from where I live. And I was standing, and I had so many things like the brake and the power cords that my backpack wasn't closing properly, but I wasn't sitting in the train, although it was mostly empty, because I hate sitting in trains. Like, I've seen how they clean the puke. Uh, if you don't know, they just throw sand on it and they scrape it. So it's like ew. So I don't like holding on to stuff because I once saw someone like I once saw a man like get in late night and he like basically took off his pants and he rubbed himself on like the poles. So I don't hold on to things either. All right. So I was like, but I'm very graceful. Like, I grew up in Bombay. I had to like get into trains and buses, avoiding getting my bottom pinched, carrying a school backpack while hanging. We don't have doors in our trains. I would be hanging on that thing while while the train was still like running, and half my body was outside. It was like I lived like that. So for me, this is like nothing. And I was standing that morning with the grace of a Romanian gymnast in post-Cold War era. I was awesome, guys. I was like happy. Then suddenly at North Station, which is like, yeah, there is, anyway, it's where the TD Garden is, where the Celtics play. No one cares. I don't anyway. So, like, a group of people got in, sports fans, like, football fans or whatever. They got in and they all sat on the seats, and I was like, cool. And then then the train got a little bit crowded. And as the train was going again slowly, at one point it turned sharply. And to my great shame, I fell, of course, because I wasn't holding on to anything. My bag falls down, splits open partly, and some of the power cords and bricks were visible. And I was just embarrassed because of falling, so I quickly, I went and I like unzipped my bag and I said, this is so embarrassing. And I'm like, you try to make awkward conversation when you're embarrassed, right? You do. And so I did. And I'm like, but those people didn't respond or nod or anything. They just stared. And then one of the men said, hey, did you see what is there in that backpack? Did you see what is there? And another person said, yeah, it looked like something really bad in there. Miss, what do you have in that backpack? Can you show it to me? Here's the thing. Although I have been, targeted for the way I look, for, stuff like that, it never once occurred to me that people would think I'm carrying something like that, like dangerous, like a weapon or a bomb inside my backpack. I mean, guys, look at me. I'm such like I'm a pleasant apple cheek broad, right? I kind of look like a veggie dumpling steamed in soy sauce, I've never thought of myself to be a person like that. So at that point, I was like, oh, this is just a joke, because I also do comedy and we talk about, we just shit on each other all the time. So I didn't think that was, but as I started like, haha, that's funny, and I started moving, they're like, can you show me what's in your backpack? We want to see what is in there. Guys, do you know if you see something, you say something? And then all of the people started looking. There were so many people. I could just feel their eyes on me, and I suddenly started getting scared, and I started getting ashamed, and it was just, it was, I just, it was just the most shameful and fearful feeling. And I didn't know what to do. I was looking at those eyes looking at me, and I basically like, and in retrospect, I think it is so stupid. If you see someone with like what you think is a bomb in the backpack in a closed carriage, you don't ask them to open it. I mean, everyone could die, right? You just, get off the next stop and run away. That's what I would do. But I mean, in retrospect, that was stupid. But at that point, I wasn't thinking of that. All I'm thinking is, oh my God, these people, this is what they're thinking of me. And I quickly unzipped, showed my backpack, zipped it back, and I stood by the door, waiting for the train to stop any spot so I could just get off and like get out of there. And it took a long time, something. And finally, the train stopped, not at my destination, but at Boston Common, which was the next stop. I got off and I just went to a park bench and I just sat there and I cried. And I don't know how the rest of the day went. It's just, I don't. I know that I ended up with a new laptop, but I know I didn't go to I didn't go to Microsoft Store that day. I didn't. But after that, it was very difficult for me to go into places where there is people. Where honestly, I'm going to be upfront and say to go into places where there's a lot of white people. I was scared, guys. I was. And that is very difficult if you're doing comedy in Boston, or if you're living in Boston, or if you're anywhere in Boston. Boston is super white. So I would like every time I went out, I would wear for some reason, all I kept thinking, and I used to keep. I could remember. I don't know who they are, but I can still remember, the way their eyes, the expression. I can remember that emotion even now. So at that time, though, it was even sharp and painful, and I started wearing like dark glasses, shades everywhere. I mean, it's so pretentious. I feel like a pretentious piece of shit when you wear shades and go into like a comedy show at like 6 o'clock in the evening. It's dark and whatever. You don't want to do that, but I didn't care. Every time, even at night time, I would wear glasses, because for me, wearing dark glasses meant a lot of my face was hidden. I could see them, but they couldn't see me, and they couldn't see my feelings, my emotions. And so for me, that was like a superpower shield or whatever. So I wore that, and I used to take a lift and, like lift line and things everywhere, which is really expensive after a while. I used to go to many places to do comedy, and it was very hard. And then that's how I continued, and it took like a couple of months or so. Yeah, maybe a month, a few weeks, whatever. And then one time I had to do a show in far in South Boston, like way south, in a place called Quincy, Massachusetts, and it was a very important show that I couldn't cancel. Like I had basically like not done shows, or if I had to go, I would go in a taxi or an Uber, but that one I couldn't cancel. So I. And it is very difficult to go in peak traffic. You can't like take a taxi. It just doesn't, it doesn't work well. So I had to take a train. And I remember that day, it was very hard. I know I was throwing up all day that day, and I hadn't even eaten, so I don't know where that was happening. I again, dressed up in like jacket and hoodie and dark glasses, like trying to look as invisible as possible, got into the train. And somehow I did my show and got back at that night. And that night was actually St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, it was St. Patrick's Day. Um, and I was and Quincy is very Irish. I was in the train, and at 2 stops later, it was still Quincy. A couple basically, they got into the train, and they were basically, St. Patrick's is where everyone, gets imbibes little, and, everyone is celebrating. And these people were, but they were like lips locked, hands held on each other. They just climbed together like Siamese twins or whatever, like, like mashing each other's bum and like so totally in love, right? They were just there. And people were like, just like smiling or whatever. I just looked at them. I didn't pay attention. At one point, though, like within like a few seconds after they got in, the train is moving, the woman just farted. Like a loud, cheese-filled, very smelly fart. And and everyone is like inching away, trying to block and trying to be polite about blocking the smell, as we all do. And then noticed that the man was still mashing her bum, although it had just been, he had just been farted on. And for me, that was like the ultimate, the nicest. I don't know what you all think about it, but to me that was like so sweet, so innocent, and so nice. It is happening, and at that time I didn't realize, but for me, I don't know, I started smiling, and then I'm like looking around. There are other people who are also smiling, and I was smiling through my dark glasses. They didn't. I mean, I could see them. They were all smiling. We were all looking at each other, and it just felt good that day. And I don't know how now I'm feeling like, I mean, I trauma, we respond and then we move on. Like when Trump happened, I took 3 weeks to go to, hike in Korea without my phone. I just went and hiked in mountains and slept in temples. That's how I respond to stress. Then I come back and do my thing. So for me, it has taken time, but I think that was for me the moment when I started to feel a little bit more optimistic about people again. When I felt like, it is bad, but it can get better. Like healing emotionally. I think that was my moment. That's my story. Thank you so much, guys.